Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku lived in a world where heroes were controlled by corporations. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The morning air in Unauthorized didn't smell of dew and exhaust fumes so much as it smelled of opportunity. It was a synthetic, cloying scent, a carefully engineered cocktail of fresh-baked corporate pastries, ionized air from public clerk displays, and the faint, metallic tang of money-changing hands. Izuku Midoriya breathed it in and felt the familiar knot of disillusionment tighten in his stomach. He walked under the shadow of a 50-story digital billboard, its surface rippling with the image of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. The colossal figure, wreathed in photogenic flames, held a pizza box aloft. "Burn away your hunger!" The hero's deep, digitally enhanced voice boomed, echoing between the skyscrapers. "With Endeavor's Hellfire Pizza! Now with 15% more pepperoni!" Below the main ad, a scrolling ticker displayed real-time data. Endeavor Enterprises, ENDV stock, 2.15%. Public approval rating, 78.4%, up 0.3% post-campaign launch. Incident response time, metro area 4.7 minutes. Izuku clutched the strap of his yellow backpack, his gaze flicking from the billboard to the street. Everything was branded. A mother pushed her child in a stroller with the Ingenium logo stamped on its canopy, a premium model promising turbocharged safety. A group of businessmen sipped coffee from cups bearing the Iwabumi Cosmetics insignia, a subtle cross-promotion with her hero agency. Even the public recycling bins were sponsored by the sanitation hero, Wash, with the cheerful slogan, "Let's clean up this town's act and its portfolio." This was the world he lived in. Heroism wasn't a calling, it was a career path. Justice wasn't a principle, it was a product. And public safety was a tiered subscription service. He ducked into a small, non-chain bookstore, the scent of old paper and ink a blessed relief from the commercialized air outside. The elderly owner, Mr. Tani, nodded at him from behind the counter. "Morning, Izuku. Looking for more pre-corporate histories?" "Always, sir," Izuku mumbled, making a beeline for the dusty back corner. He pulled a thin, worn volume from the shelf, The Dawn of Quirks, a pre-charter history. He opened it to a dog-eared page showing a grainy, black and white photo of the first-generation heroes. They were unmasked, wearing simple, functional costumes, their expressions grim and determined. There were no logos on their chests, no sponsors listed below their names. They just helped. He sighed, pulling out his own notebook, the cover labeled Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. It was a habit he couldn't break, a relic of a more innocent dream. But its contents had changed over the years. He flipped it open, his pen scratching across the page as he began a new entry, his mind still on the Endeavor ad. Hero, Endeavor, NG Todoroki. Agency, Endeavor Enterprises, CEO, Founder, Primary Asset. Current major sponsorships: Hellfire Pizza, Blaze Fire Energy Drinks, Vulcan Automotive. Market analysis: dominates the aggressive intervention market sector. High villain takedown rate, generates excellent quarterly performance reports, but suffers from high collateral damage liability costs, CDLC. His abrasive public persona creates a volatile brand image, but a loyal core demographic, males 18 to 49, keeps his stock stable. His son, Shoto Todoroki, is considered the most valuable legacy asset in the upcoming UE draft combine. Notes: the pizza campaign is a clear attempt to soften his image and appeal to a broader family demographic after the negative press from the downtown warehouse incident last quarter. PR move. Calculate success based on Q3 earnings report. His scribbling was interrupted by a familiar, explosive voice. "Still writing in that creepy stalker journal, you worthless Deku?" Izuku flinched, snapping the notebook shut. Katsuki Bakugo stood at the end of the aisle, sneering. He wasn't wearing his school uniform yet, but a designer hoodie with a subtle, stylized explosion pattern, early release merch from a brand already courting him. Bakugo wasn't just a student, he was a blue-chip prospect. Scouts from Endeavor Enterprises and Creati Corp had been watching him since middle school. His quirk was powerful, flashy, and eminently marketable. He was born for this world. "It's just analysis, Kaken," Izuku said, shrinking in on himself. It's pathetic. Bakugo scoffed, shouldering past him and knocking a stack of books to the floor. You're a quirkless, worthless liability. You have zero market value. You think any agency would even offer you an unpaid internship? You'd cost them more in insurance premiums than you'd ever be worth. Stop dreaming and go figure out how to be a useful consumer. The words were sharp, but it was the casual, businesslike cruelty that stung the most. In this world, being worthless wasn't just an insult, it was an objective, quantifiable fact. Izuku was an economic black hole in a society that worshipped profitable assets. He bent down to pick up the books, his cheeks burning. Bakugo was already gone, the bell on the shop door jingling in his wake. Izuku's gaze fell on the book he had been holding. A pre-charter history, a time before a person's worth was measured in stock points and sponsorship deals. A time when a hero was just someone who ran in to help. A foolish, unprofitable time, a cynical part of his brain whispered. Later, at Aldera Junior High, the classroom buzzed with the language of the stock market. Did you see Best Jeanist's new denim line? It sold out in 3 hours. His agency's stock is going to pop tomorrow. Yeah, but he's getting old. I'm putting my fantasy hero portfolio into that new kid, Hawks. His speed cuts down on response times, and his effortless cool brand is killing it with the teen demographic. My dad works for Deadnerat. He says they're looking to acquire a smaller hero agency with a focus on underground ops. It's all about diversifying the portfolio. The teacher, a tired-looking man with a minor quirk that let him extend his fingernails by 3 inches, droned on about career paths. Now, as third years, it's time to seriously consider your future brand identity. UA High, the top hero incubator in the country, has its draft combine in less than a year. For most of you, a sidekick position or a corporate support role is a more realistic target. His eyes flicked dismissively towards Izuku. And Midoriya, you're quirkless. Perhaps you could aim for a role in hero merch logistics? The class snickered. Izuku stared down at his desk, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He wanted to scream. He wanted to stand up and talk about honor, about sacrifice, about the feeling he got when he saw the one hero who seemed to rise above it all, All Might. Even in this commodified world, All Might was different. He was the CEO and primary hero of Simple Peace Incorporated. But he felt like an exception, a glorious loophole. His commercials were for things like children's charities and public safety announcements. His smile didn't feel like it had been focus grouped. When he shouted, "I am here!" it didn't sound like a registered trademark. It sounded like a promise. Of course, Simple Peace Incorporated was still a corporation. It had a board of directors, a PR department, and a line of action figures that Izuku owned every single one of. All Might was still a brand, the most powerful and profitable brand in the world. But Izuku clung to the belief that, underneath the corporate structure, the man, the hero, was real. He was the gold standard, the last bastion of the ideals Izuku read about in his history books. The final bell rang, a shrill, piercing sound that signaled the end of the school day and the beginning of the afternoon news cycle. Izuku packed his bag, eager to get home and watch the 4 p.m. Hero Report, hoping for a glimpse of All Might in action. He took a shortcut through a dingy underpass, the concrete walls stained with grime and covered in faded posters for long-forgotten hero-themed energy drinks. The air was thick and stagnant. He was scrolling through a news feed on his phone. Breaking: Kamui Woods' agency signs exclusive media deal with Channel 6, when a voice gurgled behind him. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. Perfect. Izuku spun around. A monstrous, churning mass of green sludge surged from a manhole cover. 2 desperate, terrified eyes swam in the semi-liquid form. It smelled like a sewer. Don't worry, the sludge villain rasped, lunging forward. I'm just hijacking your body. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds, then it's all over. Panic, cold and absolute, seized Izuku. He couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The sludge was everywhere, forcing its way into his mouth and nose. It was thick, suffocating. His limbs thrashed uselessly. No quirk. No value. No chance. His vision started to tunnel, the edges turning black. He was dying. He was dying in a forgotten underpass, another statistic, another unprofitable write-off. Crash! The manhole cover shot into the air like a cannonball, propelled by an impossible force. Fresh air flooded Izuku's lungs as the sludge was blasted off him. He collapsed, coughing and gagging, and looked up. Sunlight, golden and brilliant, streamed into the underpass. A figure stood silhouetted against it, impossibly large, with two distinct tufts of hair that looked like a crown. "Have no fear, young man," a voice boomed, a sound that vibrated in Izuku's very bones. "Why?" "Because I am here, All Might." He was even bigger in person, a mountain of muscle and smile. He moved with a speed that defied physics, trapping the splattered villain in two large soda bottles he'd seemingly produced from nowhere. "Texas!" "Smash!" he whispered, giving one of the bottles a little shake, as if to punctuate the capture. It was a smaller, less destructive move than his usual fare, almost efficient. Izuku stared, starstruck and gasping for air. All Might. All Might had saved him. The real thing. The hero. "Ah, you're all right." "Excellent," All Might said, his famous smile unwavering. He deftly screwed the caps onto the soda bottles. "My apologies for getting you caught up in my justice delivery. I was in hot pursuit, but this city's infrastructure can be a bit tricky. Lost him in the sewer system. Bad for PR when a target escapes." He gave Izuku a thumbs up. The gesture was so iconic, so perfectly All Might, that for a second Izuku forgot everything else. He fumbled for his notebook. Please, can you sign my notebook?" he stammered, bowing repeatedly. "Of course. Anything for a fan." All Might boomed, taking the notebook and a pen. In a flash, he'd signed a full 2-page spread with a giant, stylized signature. "There you go. Now I must get this fellow to the authorities. Stay safe, citizen. And remember to support your local, licensed heroes." With that, he crouched, ready to leap. "Wait!" Izuku cried, a desperate question clawing its way up his throat. It was the question that had defined his entire life, the one Bakugo had answered with such casual cruelty. Can even someone without a quirk be a hero like you? Can a liability become an asset?" All Might paused, his back to Izuku. The smile seemed to falter for a fraction of a second. But before he could answer, a cacophony erupted from the street above, an explosion. Then another. And screaming, All Might's head snapped up. "Trouble," he muttered, his voice tight. He looked from the screaming to the bottles in his hand, then back to Izuku. "Stay here, young man. It's not safe." And then he was gone, a blur of red, white, and blue, leaping towards the chaos. Izuku was left alone in the underpass, the hero's signature gleaming on the page, his vital question hanging, unanswered, in the foul air. Izuku didn't stay put. He couldn't. He scrambled up the embankment and onto the street, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. A crowd had already formed, a sea of upturned faces and glowing phone screens. They were all pointed down a narrow commercial street, where black smoke billowed into the sky. At the center of the chaos was the sludge villain. His sludge villain. All Might must have dropped the bottles in his haste. And now, oh God, the villain had a hostage. A student with spiky blonde hair and a familiar, angry face. Bakugo. He was thrashing, setting off explosions within the sludge, but it was useless. The blasts were muffled, only serving to set fire to the surrounding storefronts. He was choking, his eyes wide with a terror Izuku had never seen on him before. The pro-heroes were on the scene, but they weren't acting. They were managing. Death Arms, a hero whose brand was built on brute strength and a partnership with Biceps Brow Protein Shakes, stood with his muscular arms crossed. "I can't get a grip on him, and my quirk's not suited for this kind of fluid opponent. Any direct intervention risks harming the hostage. The liability is too high." The new hero, Kamui Woods, was extending his wooden arms, but not to attack. He was forming barriers, evacuating civilians and, more importantly, protecting a high-end Shiseido storefront from the spreading flames. Izuku could see the hero's lips moving, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was likely on a comms link with his agency's legal and finance department. A hero in a firefighter-themed costume, backdraft, was spraying a perimeter with water, carefully avoiding the villain itself. Gotta contain the fire! Collateral damage reports on this district are a nightmare. Every storefront here has premium insurance. Then Izuku saw her, empty lady. The gigantification hero was stuck in the main thoroughfare, unable to fit down the narrow street. She was waving to the news helicopter circling overhead, a perfect, practiced smile on her face. A floating drone with the Channel 8 logo hovered near her, getting a glamorous shot. She was an asset, but one with logistical limitations. Izuku's hero analyst brain, the cold, cynical part of him, kicked in. Death arms, high strength, low versatility. High risk of wrongful death lawsuit if he miscalculates. Kamui Woods, Wood is weak to fire. High risk of brand damage if he fails. Focus on damage control, a profitable but low-glory task. Empty lady, wrong venue. Relegated to PR duty. They were all doing their jobs. They were mitigating risk, managing assets, and maintaining brand integrity. They were following the corporate playbook, and Bakugo was dying. The crowd murmured, their phones held high. They were consumers watching a live-streamed crisis. Where's a hero with a better quirk for this? This is Endeavor's patrol sector, isn't it? His response times are usually better than this. His stock is gonna take a hit. Look! That news drone is getting a great angle of the hostage's face. That's an award-winning shot. No one was talking about saving him. They were talking about ratings, stocks, and camera angles. Izuku looked at Bakugo. He saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear. He didn't see a blue-chip prospect or a future rival. He saw a kid from his neighborhood, a kid he'd known his whole life, suffocating. He saw a person who needed help, and in that moment, the analysis stopped. The cynicism vanished. The calculations of profit and loss, of risk and liability, of market value and brand identity, all of it evaporated. All that was left was the core, unshakable belief he'd held since he was 4 years old. When someone is in trouble, a hero saves them. His legs moved before his brain could object. He burst through the police tape, a gasp rippling through the crowd. Hey! Kid! Stop! A police officer yelled. Death arms turned. What is this amateur doing? Get him out of here! He's a civilian liability! Izuku didn't hear them. His mind was racing, but this time it was different. It wasn't analysis, it was instinct. Sludge villain? Eyes are the weak point. Bakugo is creating explosions. Fire, but he can't breathe. I can't fight. I can't do anything. What can I do? What do I have? His eyes darted to his yellow backpack. It was heavy. It was full of textbooks. He unslung the backpack as he ran, adrenaline afire in his veins. He wasn't thinking about being a hero. He wasn't thinking about a quirk. He was just trying to buy a few seconds. For Bakugo. For a real hero to show up. Kaken! He screamed. He swung the backpack with all his might and hurled it at the villain. It sailed through the air and struck the monster right in one of its giant, floating eyes. The villain roared in pain and surprise, its gelatinous form recoiling for a split second. It was enough. Bakugo's mouth and nose were momentarily uncovered. He took a huge, desperate gasp of air. Deku? He choked out, his voice raw. What the hell are you doing here? I don't know. Izuku yelled back, clawing uselessly at the sludge encasing Bakugo's body. My legs just started moving. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. He looked into Bakugo's eyes. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't see contempt or arrogance. He saw raw, undiluted fear. And in that shared terror, something shifted between them. Why? Bakugo rasped, fresh tears welling. Izuku looked back at him, his own eyes streaming from the smoke and the sheer, overwhelming terror of it all. You looked like you were asking for help. The moment was shattered as the sludge villain reformed, its rage palpable. You again? I'll kill you both! A massive, slimy pseudopod rose up, ready to smash down on Izuku's head. He squeezed his eyes shut. This was it. A foolish, reckless, unprofitable end. I really am pathetic. The voice was not a boom. It was quiet, strained, but it cut through the noise like a thunderclap. A hand, impossibly large, grabbed Izuku's arm and pulled him back. Another hand grabbed Bakugo. Izuku's eyes snapped open to see All Might, standing between them and the villain. But this wasn't the pristine, smiling hero from the underpass. There were cracks in his smile. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth. He looked strained. "I lecture you on the traits of a true hero," All Might said, his voice low and full of self-reproach, directed at himself. "But I see now I wasn't living up to my own ideals." He planted his feet, his muscles bunching. The air pressure dropped. "Pros are always risking their lives. That is the true test of a hero." He drew his arm back, blood spattering from his mouth. Izuku saw it then. All Might wasn't just performing. He was pushing past the genuine limit. Detroit. Smayawayawash! A hurricane of wind erupted from his fist. It wasn't a punch that connected with the villain. It was a shockwave, a concussive blast of pure air pressure that was so powerful it atomized the sludge villain, scattering it into harmless droplets. The force of the punch traveled upwards, punching a hole in the smoke-filled sky. The clouds themselves began to swirl and part, and then, it started to rain. The fires were extinguished. The villain was gone. The hostage was safe. Silence fell over the street, broken only by the gentle patter of rain. The crowd stared, dumbfounded. The news helicopters captured the impossible image, a single hero who had, with one punch, changed the weather. All Might stood tall, one fist raised to the sky. He slowly turned to the assembled media, and his signature smile clicked back into place, as bright and unwavering as ever. It was a perfect shot, a billion-dollar image. The CEO of Symbol Peace Incorporated had just delivered the performance of a lifetime. The aftermath was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. As soon as the immediate threat was neutralized, a different kind of professional moved in, the PR team. A sharp-suited woman with a tablet and a Symbol Peace Incorporated lapel pin was the first to reach All Might. "Sir, fantastic work," she said in a low, urgent voice. "Visuals are 10/10. We're already editing the package for the evening news. The changing the weather angle is testing through the roof with all demographics. We need a soundbite from you, then medical will escort you out through the private corridor we've established." All Might nodded, his smile still locked in place, though Izuku could see the tremor in his hand. Meanwhile, the other heroes were being debriefed. Kamui Woods was giving a statement to a journalist. "While direct engagement was deemed high risk, our primary objective was civilian safety and property damage mitigation, which was a complete success." Death Arms was flexing for a fan's camera, already spinning his inaction as tactical patients. Izuku and Bakugo were being checked over by paramedics, who were also corporate employees from a private healthcare provider. They placed silver, branded blankets over their shoulders. Bakugo was being praised. "That was incredible thinking, kid," one of the heroes said, clapping him on the back. "Using your quirk to signal your position and fight back from the inside? That shows real grit. The scouts are going to love that." Bakugo just stared at his hands, silent. Then, they turned to Izuku. The hero's friendly expression hardened. "And you? What were you thinking? You're quirkless. Rushing into a live-threat situation like that, you endangered yourself, the hostage, and the pro-heroes on the scene. The potential lawsuits alone. Do you have any idea the liability you created?" "He was a distraction," another hero added, shaking his head. "An unauthorized variable. We had the situation contained." Contained. Izuku looked at Bakugo's pale, sweat-slicked face. He had been suffocating. That was their definition of contained. Before he could say anything, a pair of men in crisp, dark suits and earpieces approached him. They weren't police. Their jackets had a subtle, almost invisible logo embroidered on the cuff, a stylized S and P. Symbol Peace Incorporated Security. "Sir, we need you to come with us," the first man said, his voice polite but firm. He put a hand on Izuku's shoulder, not roughly, but with an undeniable pressure. "Where?" Izuku stammered. "Away from the cameras," the second man said simply. "Your involvement was unscripted. It complicates the official narrative. We just need to debrief you and have you sign a standard non-disclosure agreement." They were steering him away, past the cheering crowds, past the flashing cameras, past the heroes giving their polished interviews. He was being shuffled off stage. He was a loose end, a glitch in the perfectly produced spectacle of corporate heroism. He had acted out of pure, selfless instinct, the very thing he thought defined a hero, and the system's response was to erase him from the story. He glanced back one last time. He saw All Might, surrounded by his PR team, giving a final, booming laugh for the cameras before being whisked away. He saw Bakugo, being interviewed, looking dazed and confused. He saw the news ticker on a nearby screen, All Might saves day in dramatic hostage situation. Symbol Peace, SYMP, stock surges and after-hours trading, no mention of a quirkless boy. No mention of a thrown backpack. No mention of the moment of desperate, reckless, true heroism that had made it all possible. As the security guards led him into a featureless white van, the disillusionment Izuku had felt that morning returned, 100 times stronger. It was a cold, hard certainty that settled deep in his bones. He had just witnessed the greatest hero in the world save the day. And he had never felt more certain that the world of heroes was utterly, hopelessly broken. The inside of the van was featureless and chillingly clean. It smelled of antiseptic wipes and new plastic. There were no windows, only smooth, gray walls that seemed to absorb the sound of Izuku's own frantic heartbeat. The two men in suits from Symbol Peace Incorporated sat opposite him, their expressions as blank as the walls. They hadn't spoken a word since ushering him inside. This wasn't an arrest. It was an asset retrieval. Izuku was the asset, a problematic, unsanctioned, walking liability that needed to be contained and processed. The van came to a smooth, silent stop. The doors slid open not onto a police station, but into a sterile, underground parking garage. The air was cool and filtered. Every car was a sleek, black model, polished to a mirror shine. This was the belly of the beast, the corporate headquarters of Symbol Peace Incorporated. Izuku was led through a series of white corridors, his worn red sneakers squeaking softly on the polished concrete floors. They passed no one. The silence was absolute, punctuated only by the quiet hum of the building's climate control systems. Finally, they entered a room that was more of a glass box than an office. A minimalist desk, a single chair for him, and a woman in a razor-sharp business suit. "Thank you, gentlemen. I can take it from here," she said, her voice crisp. The security guards nodded and exited, the door closing with a soft, definitive hiss. "Please sit," the woman said, gesturing to the chair. Her nameplate read Ms. Vance, Senior Counsel, Risk Narrative Management. Izuku sat, perching on the edge of the seat. He felt like a bug under a microscope. Ms. Vance tapped a stylus on the surface of her desk, which lit up with a translucent screen displaying Izuku's school records, his address, his quirkless status, everything. Izuku Midoriya. Age 14. Quirk none. Anomaly. She looked up at him, her eyes devoid of malice but full of a terrifying, detached professionalism. "Mr. Midoriya, let's be very clear about what happened today. From a corporate standpoint, the incident at the Takami Street commercial sector was a resounding success. A high-threat villain was neutralized, a valuable future asset, Mr. Bakugo, was secured, and our primary hero, All Might, delivered a performance that has already resulted in a 4.7% surge in our stock price and an estimated 12-point jump in public confidence ratings." She paused, letting the numbers hang in the air. "The narrative is clean, powerful, and profitable. All Might, facing overwhelming odds, single-handedly saved the day. It's a classic story. It sells, but Izuku started, his voice barely a whisper. "You," she cut in, her tone unchanging, "are an unauthorized variable. A narrative complication. Your actions, while born from, let's call it misguided civic-mindedness, created a significant liability. You interfered with a live operation conducted by licensed, insured professional heroes. You put yourself, the hostage, and our assets at risk. Had you been injured or killed, the legal and public relations fallout would have been catastrophic. Symbol Peace Incorporated could have been held liable for failing to secure the perimeter. The other heroes' agencies could have faced investigations. It would have been a financial disaster." She wasn't angry. She was just stating facts, as if discussing a poorly executed marketing campaign. "The public cannot see a quirkless, Untrained civilians succeed where licensed heroes hesitated. She continued. It undermines the entire structure of professional heroism. It suggests that our rigorously selected, highly marketed heroes are fallible, and that heroism can be amateur. That is a dangerous and unprofitable message. She slid a sleek datapad across the desk. A legal document filled the screen. This is a standard non-disclosure agreement. It stipulates that you will not speak about your specific involvement in today's events to any media outlet, law enforcement agency, or private individual. You will cede all rights to your story, image, or likeness in connection with the incident to Symbol Peace Incorporated. In exchange, we will not be pressing charges for civilian interference, nor will we be filing a civil suit against your family for the potential damages you almost incurred. Izuku stared at the document. It was a gag order. They were buying his silence, threatening him with legal ruin if he refused. They were erasing him. The small, flickering ember of pride he had felt for acting, for doing something, was doused in a flood of cold, corporate reality. What if I don't sign? He asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and burgeoning anger. Ms. Vance's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. Then we would be forced to protect our interests. A press release would be issued detailing how a reckless, quirkless teenager endangered a hostage and obstructed a hero operation. We would highlight your history of hero obsession, using your notebooks as evidence of unstable behavior. UA High and every other hero academy would blacklist you. No corporate entity in Japan would ever hire you, not even to sweep floors. You would become, in a very real and legally binding sense, worthless. Your family would be buried in litigation for years. Is that the future you want, Mr. Midoriya? The threat was so absolute, so devastating, it left him breathless. He had run in to save a life, and his punishment was the complete and total annihilation of his own. He reached a shaking hand towards the datapad. This was it. The moment he officially surrendered his dream, selling the one heroic thing he'd ever done for the right to simply continue to exist. That won't be necessary, Vance, the voice came from the doorway. It was quiet, thin, and raspy, laced with an undeniable weariness. Izuku looked up to see a man he'd never seen before. He was impossibly skinny, a walking skeleton draped in an oversized, rumpled suit. His blonde hair was limp and deflated, and his eyes were sunken into dark, shadowed sockets. He looked fragile, like a gust of wind could knock him over. Ms. Vance, however, stood up immediately, her professional composure cracking for the first time. Mr. Yagi! Sir! I didn't know you were in the building. Your schedule said. My schedule is my own, the skeletal man said, taking a step into the room. He coughed, a racking, wet sound, and dabbed his mouth with a handkerchief. The boy is with me. The NDA is void. Erase all records of his presence here. Vance was stunned. Sir, with all due respect, he is a significant liability. Our protocol for narrative contamination is very clear. Your protocol is irrelevant. Yagi interrupted, his voice gaining a sliver of steel. He looked at Izuku, and for a split second, Izuku saw a flash of brilliant blue in his shadowed eyes that was shockingly familiar. I am the CEO of this company. This is not a request. It is a directive. Am I understood? Yes, sir, Ms. Vance said, her deference absolute. Of course, Mr. Yagi, the man gestured to Izuku. Come on, kid. You and I need to talk. Confused and overwhelmed, Izuku stood up and followed the strange, skeletal man out of the glass prison. He glanced back at Ms. Vance, who was already staring at her desk, her expression a mixture of confusion and frustration, like a computer that had just been given a command that violated its core programming. Yagi led him in silence to a private elevator, which ascended with breathtaking speed. The doors opened onto a windswept, deserted rooftop. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The corporate logos on the surrounding buildings glowed like malevolent constellations. Bit more air up here, Yagi wheezed, walking toward the ledge. Gives a man perspective. Izuku hugged his silver blanket around himself, shivering from more than just the wind. Who are you? What's going on? Why did you help me? The man turned to face him, the setting sun at his back. Help you? I'm the one who got you into this mess. I'm the one who was careless. And I'm the one who needs to apologize. He took a deep breath. And then he began to change. Poof! In a sudden, shocking billow of steam, the skeletal man was gone. In his place stood the colossal, muscular form of All Might. The smile was back, but it looked pained, stretched thin. Because I am here, he finished, his voice a booming echo of its former self. But just as quickly as he appeared, he seemed to flicker. More steam plumed from his body, and with a series of wet, hacking coughs, he deflated, shrinking back into the gaunt form of Toshinori Yagi. He clutched his side, a pained grimace on his face. Izuku's brain simply stopped working. His mouth hung open. He dropped his blanket. He pointed a trembling finger, his mind trying to reconcile the two images, the symbol of peace and this dying man. You're not. How? A transformation quirk? But you're skinny and... All Might is... All Might, I know. Yagi coughed, slumping against the rooftop railing. It's like sucking in your gut at the pool. A trick. This, he said, gesturing to his emaciated frame, is the real me. He lifted his shirt. Izuku gasped in horror. A catastrophic, starburst-shaped scar covered the left side of Yagi's torso. It was a web of mangled, twisted flesh, so gruesome and deep it looked like something had tried to scoop him out from the inside. Pretty nasty, right? Yagi said with a grimace. Got this in a fight about 5 years back. You wouldn't have heard about it. My PR department and our corporate partners made sure it was kept completely under wraps. Bad for the brand, you see. Can't have the symbol of peace looking vulnerable. 5 years ago, Izuku whispered, his mind racing through his hero logs. Was it the fight with Toxic Chainsaw? Yagi shook his head. A good guess. He certainly did a number on my quarterly report. But no. This was from someone worse. A fight that was never televised, never reported. A battle against an idea, kid. An idea that one person should have all the power. He lowered his shirt. My respiratory system was nearly destroyed, and I lost my entire stomach. I've had countless surgeries. The result is this, he gestured to himself again. I can only be All Might for about 3 hours a day. And it's getting shorter. The rest of the time I'm this, Toshinori Yagi, CEO of a company I can no longer control, fighting a war in a boardroom instead of on the streets. The rooftop confession began, but it wasn't just about an injury. It was about a sickness that ran deeper. When I was young, kid, it was different, Yagi said, his gaze lost in the sprawling city below. Heroism was a public service. But the world changed. Governments cut funding. Society demanded more. So, I built Symbol Peace Incorporated. The idea was to create a self-sustaining engine for good. Use my brand, my image, to generate revenue that could fund heroics on a massive scale. Training, equipment, disaster relief. I wanted to protect the idea of a hero. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. But a corporation is a machine that only knows how to grow. It needs profit. It needs shareholders. And soon I wasn't just a hero. I was a brand asset. The board of directors, the lawyers like Vance, the PR teams, they took over. My every move became a calculated business decision. All Might, you can't patrol that low-income district. The media coverage is minimal and the risk of unmarketable collateral damage is too high. All Might, we need you to make an appearance at the launch of the new Endeavor-branded sports car to show market solidarity. All Might, your approval ratings dipped by 0.2% in the female 25 to 35 demographic. You need to be seen saving more cats from trees. He turned to Izuku, his eyes burning with a fire that was All Might. Today, at the sludge incident, I was there because my team had scheduled a high-visibility patrol to coincide with the afternoon news cycle. I caught the villain, but then I was distracted by you, a fan. I lost track of time. I hit my limit. That's why I was late to the second incident. I was hiding in an alley, trying to force myself to transform again, my body screaming at me, while my comms were buzzing with panicked analysts telling me our response time metrics were plummeting. The pieces clicked into place in Izuku's mind. The hesitation of the other heroes. The obsession with property damage. All Might's own strained appearance. It wasn't incompetence. It was policy. The other heroes on the scene, they did exactly what they were trained to do. Yagi continued, his voice dripping with scorn. They assessed the situation based on a cost-benefit analysis. The life of one hostage versus the potential for a multi-million yen lawsuit, damage to 3 different corporate storefronts, and a negative mark on their performance review. In their minds, waiting was the logical, profitable choice. He leaned forward, his skeletal hands gripping the railing. And then you ran in. Izuku flinched, expecting another lecture. You, a quirkless kid with nothing to gain and everything to lose. You didn't have a contract. You didn't have insurance. You weren't thinking about your brand or your market value. You saw someone in trouble, and you acted. You were illogical. You were unprofitable. In the eyes of our entire system, what you did was the stupidest, most reckless thing you could have possibly done. Yagi turned to face him fully, a real, genuine smile finally reaching his tired eyes. It was also the most heroic thing I've seen in years. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes, hot and immediate. The words he'd been waiting his entire life to hear. Not, you can be a hero, but something far more profound. You already were. In that moment, All Might, Yagi said, his voice soft but powerful. You reminded me of what this is all supposed to be about. Not the stocks, not the ratings, not the brand. Just helping. He stood up straight, a new resolve hardening his features. That is why I am going to make you an offer. An act of rebellion against this whole damn system. He held out a hand, palm up. My quirk was not something I was born with. It is a sacred trust, a torch passed from one person to another. It is a power that is cultivated and then handed down through generations. That is its true nature. Izuku's mind reeled. A transferable quirk? It was unheard of, scientifically impossible. The name of this power is one for all. The name itself seemed to have weight, to resonate in the air around them. One person inherits the power and cultivates it, then passes it on to another. It is the crystallization of strength, a legacy of heroes who came before, all dedicated to one thing, justice. Not corporate justice. Not profitable justice. Real justice. Yagi's eyes bored into him. The woman who gave me this power, she was a true hero. She fought in the shadows, without fame or fortune. And her master before her. And his before him, for generations, one for all has existed outside the system. It cannot be patented. It cannot be trademarked. It cannot be bought, sold, or listed on the stock exchange. It is an unbranded, untamable force for good. It is the last truly free power in this world. He looked Izuku up and down, from his tear-streaked face to his scuffed red shoes. I have been searching for a successor. Someone worthy of this trust. I looked for it in the top-rated prospects, the marketable prodigies. But all I found were assets, groomed for profit. But you, kid, you ran into a fight you couldn't win, to save someone else, with no thought for yourself. You have the spirit. The body can be trained, but the soul of a hero, that has to be earned, and you've earned it. I offer you my power, Yagi declared, his voice ringing with the conviction of all might. I offer you the legacy of one for all. But you must understand what this means. This isn't a ticket to fame and fortune. It's the opposite. If you accept, you will become a rogue variable. You will live a life of off-the-books heroism. You will fight not just villains, but the very system that churns out heroes like products on an assembly line. They will see you as a threat. They will hunt you, try to control you, or destroy you. I am offering you a power that will make you the greatest hero, but one that may never be recognized or rewarded for it. He extended his hand further. So, Izuku Midoriya, do you accept this hostile takeover? Will you inherit one for all and fight for the soul of heroism itself? Izuku's world had been shattered and rebuilt 3 times in the last hour. He had been told he was worthless, then a liability, and now, worthy. Worthy of the ultimate power, the ultimate responsibility. The choice wasn't even a choice. It was an answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. Tears streamed freely down his face, but for the first time, they were not tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of validation, of overwhelming, earth-shattering hope. Yes, he choked out, his voice cracking. Yes, I accept. A wide, genuine, and triumphant grin spread across Toshinori Yagi's face. It was the best All Might smile Izuku had ever seen. Excellent, the deal was struck. The sun had fully set, and the city lights now painted the rooftop in a cold, electric glow. The first step, Yagi said back in his role as a mentor, is preparing your body. My quirk is a hurricane of power. A normal person's body would explode just from trying to hold it. You need to become a proper vessel. He pulled out a datapad, this one old and battered, its case covered in scratches. He brought up a file. It was a dizzying, terrifyingly complex workout and diet regimen. The title at the top read, American Dream Plan. It was cheesy and over the top, a stark contrast to the grim reality they had just discussed. This is where I used more or less, Yagi explained. It will push you to your absolute limit and beyond. But our training will be different. It's not about aesthetics. It's not about building a body that looks good on a magazine cover. It's about building a foundation that can withstand a rebellion. He swiped to another screen, this one filled with notes and diagrams. And while you train your body, I will train your mind. We'll rewrite your hero analysis. Forget about market share and PR ratings. We'll analyze crime statistics in the city's red zones, the unprofitable, underserved districts that corporate heroes ignore. We'll study stealth, infiltration, non-lethal takedowns, and minimizing engagement footprints. You won't learn to be flashy, you'll learn to be effective. Your final exam won't be a televised brawl. It will be a successful intervention that no one ever hears about. He pointed a long, bony finger at Izuku. Your greatest enemy will not be a villain with a powerful quirk. It will be a lawyer like Ms. Vance. It will be a news drone. It will be a contract. You must learn to be a ghost, a rumor. A true symbol is not a brand. It's an idea that lives in the hearts of the people, not on a balance sheet. The training location was just as symbolic. A few days later, Yagi took Izuku to Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Or what was left of it. For decades, illegal dumping and ocean currents had turned the once beautiful coastline into a mountain range of rusted appliances, broken furniture, and forgotten junk. It was an eyesore, a public health hazard that the city had long since written off as too expensive to clean. It was an unprofitable wasteland. Izuku stood before a mountain of trash that towered over him, the sea breeze carrying the stench of rust and decay. Your gym, Yagi announced, gesturing to the junkyard with a sweep of his arm. According to my calculations, if you clear this entire section of the beach, your body will be ready by the time of the UA entrance exams in 10 months. Izuku stared at the impossible task. It wasn't just a pile of trash. It was a monument to the system's neglect. But this is impossible, he stammered. Is it? Yagi asked, climbing atop a rusted-out refrigerator. He looked like a scarecrow king surveying his dilapidated kingdom. It's easier to be a hero when the cameras are rolling and the paycheck is guaranteed. But true heroism, kid, is found here. It's the hard, thankless, unprofitable work that nobody else is willing to do. It's seeing a broken, discarded place and deciding to fix it, not because you'll be rewarded, but because it's the right thing to do. He looked down at Izuku, his expression serious. This isn't just physical training. This is your first act of rebellion. Every piece of trash you move is a vote against the system that left it here. You're not just building your body. You're reclaiming this space. You're proving that nothing, and no one, is truly worthless. Izuku looked from the mountain of junk to the frail man who held the world's greatest power. He saw the path forward, a grueling, 10-month odyssey of sweat, pain, and rust. It was the hardest thing he would ever have to do. He walked over to a half-buried washing machine, its metal casing warped and brown with corrosion. He gripped the edge, his thin fingers straining. He pulled. It didn't budge. He planted his feet, grit his teeth, and pulled again, every muscle in his skinny body screaming in protest. The machine scraped against the sand, moving a single, agonizing inch. It was a start. He looked up at Yagi, a new fire in his eyes. He wasn't just a fanboy anymore. He was an apprentice. A revolutionary. The final shot was of him, a small, determined figure against the backdrop of decay, beginning the impossible task. The fight for the soul of heroism had begun, not with a flashy punch, but with the quiet, thankless, and utterly heroic act of cleaning up the trash. 10 months. 300 days of agony and aspiration. Izuku Midoriya's life had been distilled into a brutal, monotonous cycle. Wake before dawn, haul scrap metal until his muscles screamed, swallow a precisely measured meal dictated by all mights. American dream plan! Collapse into bed, and repeat. The Dagoba Beach Park, once a monument to societal neglect, had become his crucible. Every rusted refrigerator he dragged across the sand was a prayer. Every shattered television he heaved was a protest. He had watched his body change, the soft, undefined lines of a boyish frame hardening into something new. Calluses grew over the blisters on his hands. His back, once prone to slouching, now held a wiry strength. He was no masterpiece of physical perfection, not yet, but he was no longer a fragile vessel. He was a container being forged in rust and salt, prepared to hold a storm. All Might, in his skeletal form as Toshinori Yagi, was his constant shadow. He coached, he lectured, he pushed. But his lessons were a strange inversion of everything Izuku had ever learned about heroes. Forget flashy takedowns, my boy, Yagi had wheezed one afternoon, as Izuku struggled to tie a massive bundle of tires together. Think about non-engagement. The best fight is the one you avoid. It generates zero collateral damage and creates no media narrative for your enemies to exploit. But heroes have to fight villains. Izuku had gasped, his lungs burning. Heroes have to save people, Yagi corrected. Fighting is just one tool, and it's an expensive, messy one. Your first priority is the objective, civilian safety. Your second is extraction, getting in and out before the corporate vultures can even launch their news drones. Now, standing before the colossal gates of Uehai, Izuku felt a tremor of fear that had nothing to do with muscle fatigue. The 10 months of secluded, ideological training felt a world away. Here, in the heart of the hero industrial complex, the air itself hummed with commercial energy. Yui wasn't just a school, it was an institution, the premier hero incubator in the world. And its entrance exam was not a simple test. It was the Hero Draft Combine, the single most watched live broadcast of the year, a spectacle where teenagers were paraded like prize racehorses before the hungry eyes of corporate scouts. The campus was a fortress of glass and steel, but today it was draped in the livery of its sponsors. A massive banner for Detonarat Support Technologies hung above the main entrance. The walkways were lined with flags from Creati Corp, the agency run by the hero Majestic. Drones buzzed overhead like metallic insects, some bearing the logos of news networks, others the emblems of powerful hero agencies, all streaming live footage to a global audience. Izuku clutched the strap of his now-worn backpack, feeling small and out of place. He was surrounded by other applicants, a sea of nervous, excited faces. They wore athletic gear, many of them already sporting minor sponsorships from local businesses, a testament to their confidence. He saw a boy with engine-like calves stretching meticulously, his leggings bearing the Idaten family crest. He saw a girl with pink skin laughing with her friends, her bubbly personality already a marketable brand. And then he saw Bakugo. Katsuki Bakugo was holding court, surrounded by a small group of admirers. He was wearing a custom-designed athletic top with a stylized explosion motif, a pre-contract perk from Endeavor Enterprises, who had been aggressively courting him. He looked like he belonged here. He looked like he already owned the place. His eyes scanned the crowd with disdain, and for a terrifying second, they locked onto Izuku's. The sneer was instant, a reflex. Look what the trash heap dragged in, Bakugo said, loud enough for those around him to hear. Still trying to play in the big leagues, Deku? Didn't they tell you there's a minimum value requirement to enter the draft? Izuku flinched and looked away, his cheeks burning. He tried to channel Yagi's voice. Their metrics don't define you. Your worth is not on their balance sheet. But it was hard to believe when he was standing at ground zero of the whole rotten system. He was about to trip over his own feet when a hand gently touched his shoulder, steadying him. Whoa there! Be careful. It'd be bad business to get injured before the combine even starts, right? Izuku looked up into the round, kind face of a girl with short brown hair and a permanent blush on her cheeks. She smiled, a genuine, warm expression that felt startlingly out of place in the high-stakes tension of the crowd. "My name's Achiko Uraraka," she said cheerfully. "Nervous? Terrified?" Izuku stammered, his face turning a shade redder than her cheeks. "Me too," she admitted, bouncing on the balls of her feet. "But a good contract from a mid-tier agency could set my family up for life. You gotta risk it for the biscuit, you know?" She spoke of it with such cheerful pragmatism, a stark contrast to Izuku's ideological turmoil. For her, this was a lifeline. For him, it was a battleground. Before he could respond, a voice like a rock concert feedback loop blasted from unseen speakers. "Hello, prospects! And welcome to the annual UA Hero Draft Combine! I'm your host, Present Mike. Are you ready to show the world your brand value?" A roar went up from the crowd. Izuku just winced. They were herded into a vast auditorium. The written exam came first. Izuku had expected history and ethics, but the questions were skewed through a corporate lens. Question A: Class B villain is robbing a bank. Your quirk has a 70% chance of neutralizing the villain, but a 40% chance of damaging the bank's facade, a historic landmark. A rival hero with a 50% neutralization chance but 0% damage risk is 5 minutes away. What is the most fiscally responsible course of action? Question: You have been offered competing Level 1 sidekick contracts from Endeavor Enterprises, higher salary, stricter branding clauses, and the Fat Gum Agency, lower salary, more patrol autonomy. Detail a 5-point plan for maximizing your career trajectory based on your choice. Izuku answered them based on Yagi's teachings. He wrote about minimizing conflict, prioritizing de-escalation, and the inherent moral value of acting regardless of financial risk. He knew they were the wrong answers, but they were his answers. After the written test, they were led to the true heart of the Combine, the practical exam staging area. They stood before a towering gate, behind which lay a sprawling, full-scale cityscape, Battle Center B. In a glass-encased skybox high above, the commentary team was live on air. "Welcome back to the UA Combine, brought to you by Vulcan Automotive. Drive with a hero's heart," a man's voice buzzed. "I'm Blast Zone Brenner, and with me as always is lead market analyst, Corina Vance. A pleasure to be here, Blast Zone," a sharp, female voice replied. "The written exams have been processed, and our algorithms are already building preliminary brand viability scores for our top prospects. The real money, however, is made or lost right here, in the practical." Brenner chuckled. "That's right, folks. The rules are simple. The prospects will have 10 minutes to roam this massive urban environment and score points by disabling villain bots. The bots come in 3 tiers. 1-pointers are your common street thugs, 2-pointers are your mid-level threats, and 3-pointers are the high-value targets. The more you take down, the higher your score, and the more impressive your performance, the higher your draft stock," Corina Vance added coolly. "The scouts are watching. We have representatives from Endeavor Enterprises, Creati Corp., the Fat Gum Agency, even the Hero Public Safety Commission. They're not just looking for power, Blast Zone. They're looking for efficiency, marketability, and a low CDLC, collateral damage liability cost." The massive gates began to groan open. Present Mick's voice boomed again. "And begin!" The crowd of prospects surged forward. Izuku was left standing in the dust, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What are you waiting for?" Present Mick's voice seemed to jeer. "There's no countdown in a real incident. Go, go, go!" Izuku stumbled forward, running into the artificial city. It was a dizzying maze of concrete and glass. The villain bots were everywhere, and so was their branding. A sleek, chrome 2-pointer with the Chronos Watch Company logo moved with terrifying speed. A bulky 1-pointer shaped like a washing machine sprayed slippery foam, the squeaky clean detergent brand emblazoned on its side. A squad of smaller bots rolled out of an alley, their tops spinning like tops, bearing the Yo-Yo Yogurt insignia. It was a battlefield of advertisements. The other students were already scoring. Boom! A massive explosion ripped through a 3-pointer. Bakugo, propelled by his quirk, was a whirlwind of destruction, a savage grin on his face. "He's a natural!" Brenner exclaimed on the broadcast. "Look at that raw power! That's the kind of high-engagement content that sells merchandise. His property damage is high, Vance noted, but his takedown rate is unprecedented. Endeavor Enterprises loves that kind of aggressive market dominance. His stock is soaring. Elsewhere, the boy with the engines in his legs, Tenya Ida, moved with breathtaking precision, disabling bots with swift, clean chops, never scuffing a single building. And there's Tenya Ida, from the Idaten lineage, Vance said approvingly. A bit old-fashioned, but look at that efficiency. Zero wasted movement, minimal CDLC. A reliable, low-risk asset. He'll be a dependable sidekick for a top-tier firm. Izuku ran through the streets, his mind a maelstrom of panic. Yagi's training felt a million miles away. This wasn't a stealth mission. This was a chaotic free-for-all. He had the power of one for all coursing through him, a secret nuclear reactor humming beneath his skin. But Yagi's final instructions had been terrifyingly clear. You have not yet learned to control the output. A full power punch will destroy your body. A full power kick will destroy your body. You have one, maybe two uses before you are completely incapacitated. Do not use it. Not unless there is no other choice. Your goal today is not to win. It is to survive and get into UA through any means necessary. Be a ghost. But how could he be a ghost in the middle of a televised demolition derby? He had no points. He was failing. The dream was slipping away. He saw a lone one-pointer, a clunky Tacoba pizza bot, trundling down an alley. This is it. Maybe I can damage it without using one for all. He ran at it, trying to pry a panel off, but the metal was too thick. The bot swiveled, its single red eye locking onto him, and smacked him aside with a metal arm. He flew into a pile of trash bags. Oof, a rough start for Prospect 7111. Brenner winced. He seems completely out of his depth, quirkless, according to his file, Vance said dismissively. A diversity inclusion entry from the school board, I presume. His odds of scoring a single point are, statistically speaking, 0. He's a non-factor, a non-factor. The word echoed in his head, a final nail in the coffin of his dream. No. I didn't work this hard to be a non-factor. He remembered Yagi's face, the weight of the legacy he carried. He remembered the impossible mountain of trash he had conquered. He got to his feet, a desperate resolve hardening his face. He saw another one-pointer rounding the corner. Okay. Not 100%. Not even 5%. Just a tiny spark. The bare minimum. He focused, trying to channel the roaring ocean of power inside him into a single drop. One for all. 1% leg. He leaped, a surge of unfamiliar energy propelling him, and brought his foot down on the robot's head. There was a sickening crack, both from the robot's chassis and from his own leg. A spiderweb of agony shot up from his ankle. The robot sparked and fell, disabled. 1 point. But the commentators had seen it. Wait a minute, Brenner said, leaning forward. Did you see that? Prospect 7111 just took down a bot. But look at his leg. The camera zoomed in. Izuku's leg was bent at a horrifyingly unnatural angle. He crumpled to the ground, biting back a scream of pure agony. My word, Corina Vance said, her voice laced with clinical disgust. He disabled a single, low-value target, and in the process, he has completely disabled himself. The maintenance cost on a hero like that would be astronomical. He's not an asset. He's a black hole of medical expenses. Any scout watching this has just written him off permanently. That was, without a doubt, the single most unprofitable action I have ever seen in a combine. Tears of pain and frustration streamed down Izuku's face. He had scored 1 point and destroyed himself in the process. It was over, and then the ground began to shake. A shadow fell over the entire street. From behind a skyscraper, a new robot emerged. It was colossal, a 10-story behemoth of steel and hydraulics, its head scraping the tops of the buildings. A giant, glowing zero was painted on its chest. Looks like the zero-pointer is making an appearance, folks! President Mick's voice boomed, laced with manufactured excitement. A classic obstacle, Brenner explained. Worth 0 points. It's an environmental hazard, a test of risk assessment. The smart play, the profitable play, is to avoid it and keep racking up points on smaller targets. The other prospects were already running, a panic stampede away from the giant. It was the logical move. Wasting time on a pointless, invincible obstacle was bad business. Izuku tried to crawl away, his shattered leg dragging uselessly behind him. The 0-pointer took a step, and the street buckled. A chunk of concrete dislodged from a building and rained down. He heard a small cry of pain nearby. He looked over. It was the kind girl from the entrance. Uraraka. A large piece of rubble had pinned her leg. She was trapped, directly in the path of the approaching giant. Her face was pale with terror. The world went silent for Izuku. The commentators, the other students, the burning pain in his leg, it all faded away. All he saw was her. All he heard was Yagi's voice, not the strategist, but the hero. You saw someone in trouble, and you acted. The corporate playbook was clear, she was a competitor. Her failure was his potential gain. Saving her offered no points, no reward, only risk. It was an unprofitable, illogical action. Screw the playbook. He pushed himself up. He ignored the fire in his leg. He looked at his arms, his remaining good leg. He had one shot. One chance to do the right thing. Not for a contract. Not for the points. For her. Everything, he thought. All of it. He channeled one for all. Not 1%. Not 5%. He didn't know how to meter it. He just opened the floodgates. The power surged through him, a cataclysmic force that made the 1% he'd used before feel like a static shock. It filled his legs, it roared up his spine, it screamed into his arm. He bent his good knee and leaped. The ground cracked beneath him as he rocketed into the air, a green blur of pure, untamed energy. He flew past the second story, the fifth, the seventh, until he was level with the 0-pointer's massive head. He drew back his right arm, the limb already screaming in protest as the power it could not contain began to tear it apart from the inside. He saw the shocked faces of the scouts in their skyboxes. He saw Bakugo, frozen mid-run, staring up at him in disbelief. He thought of All Might's smile. He thought of 10 months of hauling trash. He thought of a girl trapped in the shadow of a monster. This isn't for a grade, he screamed in his mind. This is to save her. Smay away awash! His fist connected with the robot's faceplate. The sound was not a clang of metal on metal. It was a sonic boom, an explosion of kinetic energy that echoed through the entire city. The robot's head imploded, the metal crumpling like tin foil. The shockwave traveled down its body, and the entire 10-story structure buckled, groaned, and then collapsed backwards, away from Uraraka. The force of the punch shattered Izuku's world. His right arm exploded in a sunburst of agony, the bones turning to powder. His left leg, which he'd used to jump, fractured in a dozen places from the strain. The backlash of the power he'd unleashed sent him tumbling through the air, a broken puppet with its strings cut. As he fell, he saw Uraraka, safe. He had done it, and then, everything went black. Silence. For a full 10 seconds, the entire combine was silent. The crowd, the commentators, the scouts, everyone stared in stunned, horrified disbelief. Blast Zone Brenner was the first to speak, his voice a choked whisper. My God! Corina Vance found her voice next, but it was sharp, analytical, and utterly scathing. Let me be perfectly clear about what we just witnessed. Prospect 7111, Izuku Midoriya, has just executed the most catastrophically irresponsible move in the history of this institution. He engaged a 0-point, non-priority target. In doing so, he has sustained 100% self-inflicted damage, rendering himself completely non-functional. The force of his attack, while significant, has resulted in an unprecedented level of potential property damage claims should that behemoth have fallen differently. He has, in one single move, gone from being a worthless asset to a multi-million yen liability. He didn't just fail the exam. He has set a new standard for failure. Down on the ground, Izuku's vision swam back into focus. He was in a heap, his body a symphony of pain. The 0-pointer was a smoldering wreck behind him. Uraraka was safe. And then, the final horn blared. Time's up! It was over. 0 villain points. 1 destroyed body. He had failed. He had failed All Might. He saw Uraraka rush over to present Mike, her face earnest. "Excuse me. Can I give him some of my points? I have plenty. He saved my life." Present Mike just shook his head. "Sorry, little listener. Points aren't transferable. Rules of the combine." The finality of it crushed him. He closed his eyes, letting the pain wash over him. Then, a tiny, elderly woman in a doctor's coat was standing over him. "Recovery girl, UA's chief medical officer." She pursed her lips, her expression a mixture of pity and severe disapproval. "Good grief. There's being reckless, and then there's this. We can't have assets that break this easily." She leaned down and gave him a soft kiss on the forehead. Her quirk activated, and a wave of profound exhaustion washed over him as his body began to knit itself back together, accelerating the healing process at a massive cost to his own energy. It wasn't a gentle mending, it was a rapid, draining repair, like an emergency patch on a faulty machine. The walk home was a blur of exhaustion and despair. He had failed. The letter from Yue arrived a week later. He held it in his trembling hands, too afraid to open it. It was thin. A rejection. His mother, Inko, tried to comfort him, but he just sat in his room, staring at his All Might poster. "I'm sorry," he thought. "I'm so sorry, All Might. I wasn't ready." Finally, he couldn't take the suspense anymore. He tore it open. A small metal disc fell out onto his desk. It flickered to life, projecting a hologram, but it wasn't the school principal. It was All Might, in his booming, muscular form. "I am here." As a projection, Izuku stared, speechless. "Young Midoriya," All Might began, his tone more subdued. "I know you believe you failed. On the metrics of this combine, you did. You scored 0 villain points. The corporate scouts and even most of the UA faculty have written you off as a reckless, uninsurable liability." Izuku's heart sank. This was it. The confirmation of his failure. "But," All Might continued, a smile spreading across his face, "the entrance exam had another, secret component. A factor that the modern, corporatized hero world has tried very hard to forget." The scene in the hologram shifted. It was a view from a security camera, showing the faculty boardroom. Nizu, the principal, sat at the head of the table. Aizawa, Vlad King, Midnight, and a skeletal Tashinori Yagi were all present. 0 villain points. Complete self-destruction. He's a menace. Aizawa's voice droned, flat and dismissive. "We can't possibly accept him into the hero course," said another teacher. "Our insurance premiums would skyrocket." Then Yagi spoke up, his voice weak but firm. "He saved another applicant. He sacrificed himself completely to save a life, with no thought of reward. Tell me, is that not the very definition of heroism?" "It's the definition of illogical," Aizawa countered. "Heroes must be able to function after a single engagement." "Perhaps," Nizu's cheerful voice cut in, his beady eyes gleaming. "But you are all forgetting an old rule, one from before the corporate charters. A rule I quite enjoy for its chaotic potential, the rescue point system." The hologram shifted back to All Might. "While you were unconscious, that young woman you saved, Achiko Uraraka, went to the judges and pleaded to give you her points. A noble, but fruitless gesture. However, your actions did not go unnoticed." The screen showed another clip, Izuku's desperate, flying punch from a dozen different camera angles. "For the selfless, unprofitable, and utterly heroic act of saving a fellow competitor at the complete cost of yourself," All Might declared, his voice swelling with pride. "The UA High Faculty, at my strong suggestion, has awarded you 60 rescue points." Izuku gasped. 60 points. It was more than enough. "You have passed the practical exam, my boy," All Might boomed. The joy that flooded Izuku was so intense it was painful. He was in. He had done it, however, All Might said, his expression turning serious. "The board was resistant. They see you as a risk. A wild card that threatens their carefully balanced system. So, a compromise was reached. You have been accepted into UA High, but not into the hero course." The joy evaporated, replaced by cold confusion. "You have been placed in the General Studies Department, Class 1C," All Might explained. But Principal Nizu, who finds your potential fascinatingly disruptive, has included a unique clause. You will be given one chance. If, during the UE Sports Festival, you can demonstrate overwhelming success and prove that you can be a brand-viable asset, you will be transferred into the hero course. It was a bittersweet victory. A backhanded acceptance. He wasn't a hero in training. He was a probationary asset, a project, a gamble. He was being allowed in the door, but only to be put on trial. The hologram of All Might leaned closer, his expression intense. Do not be discouraged, my boy. This is part of the battle. You didn't win the game. You showed them there's another way to play, and it terrified them. Now you are on the inside. This is where the real rebellion begins. The projection faded, leaving Izuku alone in his room. He looked at his acceptance letter. It wasn't a ticket to his dream. It was a declaration of war. He was an outsider, an unbranded anomaly in a world of corporate heroes. A slow smile spread across his face. He was in. And he was going to tear their system down from the inside. Welcome to UA, the letter read. For Izuku, it sounded like the opening bell for the fight of his life. The first day at UA High was nothing like Izuku Midoriya had dreamed. There was no triumphant stride through the massive doors of Class 1A, no immediate camaraderie with the best and brightest prospects of his generation. Instead, he found himself in a sterile, standard-issue classroom on the other side of campus, surrounded by the quiet hum of mediocrity. This was Class 1C, General Studies. The land of the written off. The students here were a different breed from the preening, confident applicants at the Combine. They were the ones who hadn't made the cut for the hero or support courses. They talked not of contracts and draft stock, but of business degrees, law school, and hero agency management, the respectable, unglamorous support structure that held up the glittering pyramid of professional heroism. They were aspiring to be the cogs, not the faces of the machine. To them, Izuku, the boy who had famously scored 0 villain points and earned a pity placement, was just another cog. It was the perfect cover. Settle down, their homeroom teacher said, a man whose apathy was a tangible force in the room. Welcome to UA's General Studies program. Our goal is to prepare you for careers that support the hero industry. For the next 3 years, you will learn accounting, marketing, law, and logistics. You are the future brand managers, the liability adjusters, the PR specialists. Remember, a hero's punch might stop a villain, but a well-written contract is what keeps them paid. Don't cause trouble, keep your heads down, and you might one day work for someone who graduated from Class 1A. Izuku scribbled in a new notebook, this one unmarked and plain. Yagi-sensei, Lesson 4, Infiltration. The most effective operative is the one nobody notices. My placement in Gen Ed is not a failure, it is a strategic advantage. I am invisible. He tried to believe it. But as the teacher droned on about quarterly earnings reports and brand synergy, he couldn't help but feel a pang of bitter disappointment. He could hear, in his imagination, the excited chatter from the hero course, the electric thrill of a first day on the fast track to stardom. He was here, learning how to count the money, while they were over there, learning how to earn it. The morning was a blur of administrative tedium. They were issued student ID cards that doubled as debit cards, preloaded with a campus stipend sponsored by a financial services company. They were given tablets loaded with UA's proprietary scheduling and performance tracking software, its interface plastered with ads for hero-branded energy drinks. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku looked up as the teacher called his name. The principal's office wants to see you. Now. A ripple of murmurs went through the class. A visit to the principal's office on the first day? For the 0-point kid? Izuku felt a cold dread wash over him. Had they changed their minds? Was the probationary asset being liquidated before he even had a chance? He grabbed his bag and walked out of the classroom, the weight of 25 pairs of curious eyes on his back. He found Principal Nizu waiting for him in the hallway, perched on the shoulder of a towering administrative assistant. The principal, a creature that could be a mouse, a bear, or a dog, beamed at him, his black eyes twinkling with an unnerving intelligence. Ah, Mr. Midoriya. So glad you could join me, Nizu chirped, his voice a cheerful paradox to the anxiety churning in Izuku's stomach. Big day. Exciting times. Be Principal Nizu, sir, Izuku stammered, bowing. Did I do something wrong? Wrong? Niza chuckled, a sound like tiny bells. My dear boy, from a certain point of view, your very existence in my school is wrong, and that's what makes it so wonderfully interesting. You are a statistical anomaly, a disruptive element in a very carefully balanced ecosystem. And I, for one, cannot wait to see what happens when I introduce you to the control group. He gestured down the hall with a tiny paw. Come along. Class 1A is about to have their quirk apprehension test. A standardized assessment of their raw potential and marketability. I've arranged for you to participate. Izuku's blood ran cold. Participate? But I'm in general studies. You don't have a place there. Precisely. Niza clapped his paws together. Think of it as a special evaluation, a chance for our top portfolio manager, that is to say, Mr. Aizawa, to get a baseline reading on the unbranded asset that slipped through the cracks. Consider it your first, and perhaps only, chance to make an impression. No pressure. With that, Niza scurried away, leaving Izuku standing in the hallway, his heart hammering. This was it. The trial All Might had spoken of. It was starting now. He took a deep breath, clutched the strap of his backpack, and walked in the direction Niza had indicated. He arrived at an expansive outdoor training field just as the last of the Class 1A students were filing out of the locker rooms, now dressed in blue UA athletic uniforms. They were the elite, the top 1% of the draft class, and they radiated an aura of confidence and power. Izuku recognized many of them from the combined broadcast. The stoic, dual-haired boy, Shoto Todoroki, the energetic girl with pink skin, Mina Ashido, and of course, Bakugo, who was already sneering at the world in general. Then he saw Uraraka, the girl he'd saved. She spotted him and her eyes widened in surprise, a friendly smile forming before she seemed to catch herself, her gaze flicking around at her new, high-status classmates. A public association with a Gen Ed student might be bad for her initial branding. Their homeroom teacher stood before them, a man who looked as though he hadn't slept in a decade. Shota Aizawa. Pro hero, Eraserhead. An underground hero famous for his low media profile and brutally efficient capture rate. He was a specialist, a niche asset, and UA's most notorious portfolio manager. His eyes, heavy-lidded and bored, swept over his class of prize-winning students. If you're here to make friends and play nice, you can leave now, Aizawa began, his voice a monotone drawl that sucked all the energy from the air. This is UA's hero course. For the next 3 years, this is not a school, it is a high-stakes development program. You are not students, you are assets. My job is to cultivate your potential and maximize your eventual return on investment for this institution. He paused, his gaze making every student feel like they were being audited. UA is the #1 hero school because we produce the highest-earning heroes. Our graduates secure the most lucrative contracts, the most profitable sponsorships, and the highest public approval ratings. That is our metric for success. Your personal feelings, your dreams of justice, your desire to do good, they are all irrelevant unless they can be monetized. His eyes were cold, hard chips of obsidian. Your entire time here, you will be under constant evaluation. Your stock will rise and fall with every test, every exercise. If your performance stagnates, if you become a liability, if your projected market value drops below an acceptable threshold, you will be cut. I will expel you without a moment's hesitation and replace you with a more promising asset from a lower-tier class. That is my promise to you. The cheerful orientation day atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a chilling, corporate reality. This was the philosophy Yagi was fighting against, personified in one tired, cynical man. Aizawa's gaze then fell on Izuku, who was standing awkwardly at the edge of the group. And speaking of assets, he drawled, "We have a guest. This is Izuku Midoriya. General Studies. He is here on the principal's whim for a baseline assessment. Do not concern yourselves with him. He is a statistical outlier." Bakugo's head snapped towards Izuku, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and incandescent rage. Deku? Here? With us? He opened his mouth to shout, but Aizawa's sharp glare silenced him. First on the agenda, a quirk apprehension test, Aizawa continued, ignoring the disruption. In a normal school, you would do standardized physical tests. A waste of time and resources. Here, we use these 8 tests to get a quantitative measure of your primary asset, your quirk. Bakugo flinched, surprised at being singled out. You had the highest villain point score in the combine, Aizawa said. What was your best softball throw in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo said, looking thrown off. Right. Now try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him a ball. Do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Make it profitable. Bakugo grinned, the familiar arrogance returning. He stepped into the circle, winding up. Profitable, huh? How's this for a stock boom? He threw the ball, and at the last second, unleashed a massive explosion from his palm. Die! The ball became a comet, screaming into the sky with a trail of smoke. Aizawa held up a small device. A number appeared on the screen, 705.2 meters. The class erupted in gasps of woe. An incredible, that's raw, marketable power, Aizawa said, his tone flat. The foundation of a high-value brand. He turned to the rest of the class. This is what you're up against. The next 3 years will be a constant series of these trials. Show me you're worth the investment. Now let's begin. The tests were a brutal showcase of raw talent. For the 50-meter dash, Tenya Ada, the boy with engines in his legs, leaned forward. Recipro burst, he declared, and shot across the track in 3.04 seconds. Aizawa made a note. High efficiency, low energy consumption per use. Excellent for rapid response, a key metric for urban patrol contracts. Bakugo followed, using a series of smaller, controlled explosions to propel himself across in 4.13 seconds. It was slower, but infinitely more flashy. Flashy, but inefficient, Aizawa muttered, though he made another note. High media appeal. Draws attention. Useful for televised events and diverting public focus. When it was Izuku's turn, he just ran. 7.02 seconds. The slowest by a wide margin. A few students snickered. Bakugo just glared, a strange, confused anger in his eyes. He had seen Izuku jump 10 stories. What was this pathetic act? The grip strength test. The standing long jump. The side-to-side steps. In every single one, Izuku performed like a slightly above-average, quirkless boy. He followed Yagi's instructions to the letter, be a ghost. Do not show them the storm. Not yet. With each mediocre result, he could feel his perceived value plummeting. He was cementing his status as a joke. Finally, they came back to the ball throw. It was Izuku's turn. He stepped into the circle, the ball feeling heavy and alien in his hand. This was the test that had broken him at the combine. This was the moment. He took a deep breath, preparing to channel one for all into his finger, just as he and Yagi had practiced. He drew his arm back, and the power vanished. It was a sensation like a plug being pulled, the roaring ocean of one for all inside him suddenly becoming a placid, silent pond. He stumbled, the sudden absence of power disorienting him. I erased your quirk, Aizawa's voice cut through his confusion. The teacher's eyes were glowing a faint red, his long black hair floating around his head. His capture weapon, a scarf made of a carbon fiber alloy, writhing like snakes. I saw your file. And your performance at the combine, Aizawa said, his voice dangerously low as he strode towards Izuku. A power that shatters your own body with every use. You call that an asset? You think an agency will invest in a hero who needs a full medical rebuild after a single punch? You think the sponsors will line up for a hero who's out of commission for a week after one heroic moment? He was in Izuku's face now, his gaze pinning him to the spot. A one-time use hero is a disposable product, not a sustainable asset. You'd be a flare, burning brilliantly for a single moment before fizzling into a pile of debt and medical bills. You have zero long-term viability. Whatever power you have, it's worthless in its current state. You can't be a hero like that. The words were almost identical to what Yagi had said, but the context was entirely different. Yagi had said them as a challenge to overcome. Aizawa was saying them as a final judgment. With a blink, Aizawa's hair fell, his eyes returned to normal, and the roaring power of one for all flooded back into Izuku's system. I've returned your quirk, Aizawa said, stepping back. You have one more throw. Show me you're not a complete write-off. But if you break yourself again, I will personally escort you to the General Studies building and ensure you never set foot on this field again. Izuku stood in the circle, his body trembling. The entire class was staring, silent. He could feel Bakugo's intense gaze, Todoroki's cool, analytical stare. This was his one chance. Break himself and be expelled from the running forever. Or, he's right, Izuku thought. A hero who breaks is a liability. But a hero who gives up is nothing. He thought of Yagi's training. Not just the physical, but the mental. Control. Finesse. Localize the impact. Minimize the cost. He took a deep breath. He drew his arm back. He focused the entire, raging hurricane of One for All, not into his arm, not into his body, but down into the tip of a single finger. It was the most difficult act of concentration he had ever attempted. The power fought him, wanting to flood his entire limb, to shatter his bones in a glorious, self-destructive burst. He held it, contained it, a nuclear reactor condensed to the size of a fingertip. He threw the ball. And at the very last moment, he flicked his finger. The sound was like a rifle shot. The ball, propelled by an impossible force, shot into the sky, a tiny white speck disappearing into the blue. A shockwave of wind blasted backwards, kicking up a cloud of dust. Izuku stood there, his arm intact. His body was fine. But his right index finger was a mangled, swollen, purple mess, clearly broken. The pain was sharp and intense, but it was localized. It was a single point of failure, not a total system crash. Aizawa held up his device. It beeped, and he showed the screen to the class. 705.3 meters, 1/10 of a meter farther than Bakugo. The class exploded. 0.3? He beat Bakugo. But how? He didn't even look like he moved. Bakugo was frozen, his mouth agape. Then, his shock curdled into pure, unadulterated fury. He charged at Izuku, his palms sparking. DKU, you bastard! What was that? You've been holding out on me. What kind of trick is this? Before he could reach him, he was ensnared in Aizawa's capture weapon. Stand down, the teacher said, his eyes glowing red again. Don't make me at assaulting a fellow asset to your behavioral demerits. It'll hurt your contract negotiations. Bakugo struggled for a moment before Aizawa released him. He stood there, panting, staring at Izuku not with simple anger, but with a new, terrifying confusion. Deku, the worthless, quirkless pebble in his path, had not only manifested a powerful quirk but had used it with a cunning, strategic mindset that Bakugo couldn't comprehend. This wasn't the Deku he knew. This was a rival. Aizawa walked over to Izuku, looking at his broken finger with a clinical eye. So you can control the damage output to a single location, he said, his tone still flat. A slight improvement in your personal damage control. You went from a 100% loss to, what is that? A 5% loss of limb functionality. It's an improvement, but it's still wildly inefficient. You took yourself out of a fight with a single action. He turned to the class. But more importantly, he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, what is his brand? What does this performance tell the market? His first showing was reckless power. His second is controlled self-destruction. It's unpredictable. It's unstable. There's no coherent brand identity here. Is he a powerhouse? A strategist? A glass cannon? The market hates uncertainty. A hero needs a clear, consistent, and marketable image. He looked back at Izuku. You have power, Midoriya. That much is clear. But you have no idea what to do with it. You're a raw material with no production plan, and in this business, that makes you more of a risk than an asset. As Aizawa spoke, Izuku saw the other students' reactions. Most were just shocked by the power. But a few were already analyzing. Uraraka looked at him with a mixture of awe and deep concern for his mangled finger. She saw the power, but she also saw the cost, and her pragmatic mind was likely running a cost-benefit analysis that came up deep in the red. Ida, however, was muttering to himself, his hand on his chin. Incredible. He localized the catastrophic structural failure to a single, non-essential appendage. From a risk management perspective, it's brilliant. He sacrificed a finger to achieve maximum output while preserving the operational integrity of his core chassis, his arms and legs. It's an inefficient use of his own body as an asset, yes, but it's a genius mitigation of external liability. He saw the cold logic in the self-mutilation, and then there was Todoroki. The prized asset of Endeavor Enterprises stood perfectly still, but for the first time all day, his heterochromatic eyes were fixed on Izuku with a flicker of genuine interest. He, more than anyone, understood the concept of an overwhelming, destructive power that felt more like a curse than a gift. He saw not a competitor, but a strange, distorted mirror of his own struggle. The rest of the tests finished in a blur. When the final scores were posted, Izuku was dead last. 21st out of 21 participants. And as I said, Aizawa announced to the class, the asset with the lowest performance will be cut. He paused, letting the weight of the sentence hang in the air. The class held its breath. That was a logical deception, Aizawa said with a feral grin. A performance incentive to ensure you all maximized your output. No one is going home today. Your development plans will be distributed tomorrow. He started to walk away, then stopped and turned back to Izuku. Midoriya. Go to the nurse's office. And don't think this changes anything. You are still in general studies. And you are still on probation. Your performance today was noteworthy. But not yet profitable. Relief and exhaustion washed over Izuku in equal measure. He had survived. He hadn't been expelled. He had shown a sliver of what he could do. He trudged towards the nurse's office, cradling his broken finger. As he walked, he heard footsteps behind him. Hey! Wait up! It was Uraraka. She was jogging to catch up with him, a worried look on her face. Beside her, walking with a stiff, formal gait, was Ida. Midoriya, correct? Ida said, pushing up his glasses. I must commend you. Your final throw was an inspired demonstration of tactical self-sacrifice. While I cannot condone the recklessness, the underlying strategic thinking was fascinating. Are you okay? Uraraka asked, ignoring Ida's bizarre compliment and pointing at his finger. That looked like it really hurt. Was it worth it? Just for a test? Izuku looked at them, surprised. He had expected to be ostracized, a Gen Ed pariah. It had to be done, Izuku said quietly. I'm Ochiko Uraraka, and this is Tenya Ida, Uraraka said, introducing them properly. We were in the same orientation group for the Combine. In honor, Ida said with a short bow. I must confess, Midoriya, I find your position intriguing. You possess a quirk of immense power, yet you are unlisted, unbranded, and placed in the general population. It's a highly irregular market position. What is your strategy? Izuku was taken aback. My strategy? He means, what's your deal? Uraraka translated with a smile. She lowered her voice slightly. Look, I'll be honest. I'm here to make money. My family's construction company is going under, and a hero's salary is the only thing that can save it. I need to be practical. I need a solid, dependable contract. And I am here to preserve the legacy of my family, Ida stated proudly. The Ida family has run the Idaitan Hero Agency for 3 generations. We pride ourselves on honor, public service, and adherence to the law. But in today's market, we are a boutique agency, being squeezed out by megacorporations like Endeavor Enterprises. I must excel here at UA to prove that our brand of heroism still has value. They were both laying their cards on the table, speaking the language of this world. They were telling him their business plans. You too, Izuku said slowly, you don't think it's wrong? The system? The way heroes are treated like products? Uraraka shrugged, a sad look in her eyes. It's not about right or wrong. It's just the way it is. You can't change the market. You just have to find a way to succeed in it. A flawed system is still the system we are bound to operate within, Ida agreed. One must work within the established structures to effect change, however incremental. Izuku looked at them, the pragmatist and the traditionalist. They were good people, trapped in the same machine he was, just trying to navigate it in their own way. And then he remembered another of Yagi's lessons. A rebellion of one is a tragedy. A rebellion of many is a revolution. Find allies, even unlikely ones, maybe, Izuku said, a new idea taking root in his mind. Maybe you don't have to succeed in it. Maybe you can build something new, outside of it. Uraraka and Ida looked at him, confused. I don't have a brand, Izuku said, a flicker of confidence in his voice. I don't have a strategy, not the kind you mean. But I have a goal. I want to be a hero who saves people, not for a paycheck, not for a legacy, but because it's the right thing to do. And I think that can be valuable. Just not in a way they know how to measure. He looked from Uraraka's curious face to Ida's analytical one. They were seeing the world in terms of contracts and legacies. He was offering them a stake in an idea, a high-risk, unproven, potentially world-changing startup. Uraraka tilted her head. That's a really unprofitable business model, Midoriya. But an intriguing one, Ida added, a thoughtful glint in his eye. A complete disruption of the current market paradigm. Izuku smiled, a real, genuine smile. I know. But it's mine. He left them there and continued to the nurse's office. He had survived his first trial. He was broken, in last place, and still on the outside looking in. But he wasn't invisible anymore. And he wasn't alone. Orientation day was over. The insurgency had just found its first potential recruits.